Good morning, folks. I am in a very stripped back version this morning of what I usually have because I've been having software conflict issues. And so I am operating out of a very, very stripped back studio this morning. Not even sure that everybody can hear me. Because of the type of studio that I'm in. I rarely use this particular software, but it's very much of a background backup type software. So I am here sitting in my office uh, without all the typical things that I usually would have. And I will see if I have anybody joining me here in a moment or two. Um, as we get into a conversation this morning about leadership and authority. If I don't, well, my this is telling me that I've got four people with me, but I see nothing in my comments yet. So I'm going to hang in there for just a couple of minutes. I wanted those that are normally with me to see that that are here, that I haven't abandoned you. You get up at 6 a.m. to participate in this broadcast, and I wanted to let you know that I am, in fact, here. In fact, let me see. Okay, I am seeing some chats here this morning. I do see it. Again, I'm using a different software than I normally use. I'm going to close that one right out. I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to share screen and all those things that I typically do, but I do say good morning. I do see this morning that we've got Priscilla here, and we've got Steve and Donna here, and Dawn is here. Uh, Zara is here. So, good morning to all of you. Again, I am in a very, very stripped back version of a studio that I hardly ever use. I use a studio called vMix, and its latest iteration and the Microsoft latest iteration appear to be in conflict with each other. And last night, before I ended the day, everything seemed copacetic. But this morning, I came up to the office, and it is not all. It is not all working. Wasn't working, so I am back to this very, very stripped back version that I don't usually use. But you can hear me. You can see me. Uh, Tell me you can hear me, right? And anybody that's listening via podcast, I'm not recording this, so it's not going to be on the podcast because I didn't have the ability to do this at this late moment in time here. But anyway, friends, let's get into our conversation this morning. I cannot share screen and things like that. I probably can in this software. I just don't know how to do it. It's changed since the last time I used it. So let's just have our conversation. We were talking this morning about leadership, and we are talking about leadership and authority. Jesus has just on the way down the mountain been telling his new leaders that they are responsible to lead in a different fashion. They are not going to be leading in the same way that people around them lead. They're not leading by authority. They're not leading by uh, lording it over people. They're leading by loving people. So love as the modus operandi of this new form of leadership that Jesus is calling his people to, and his leaders to, specifically to love, and to it's easy to love people that you like. I mean, I like all of you. It's easy to love all of you, but it's sometimes not as easy to love people that are cantankerous and difficulty or obstinate or who think differently politically than you might think. And so sometimes we find it very, very difficult to love people like that. And yet, that's exactly what Jesus has done. He's gone and said, "You need to love your enemies." Now, they're coming down off the mountain. Remember, they are to the northwest, kind of up in the mountains um, of the Sea of Galilee. And as they're coming down, Jesus has been instructing them, and now we have them getting into Capernaum, and the very first person that they're met with, and this is kind of the irony of it, uh, is a Roman leader. So I'm going to read this to you. I'm trying to see how to. I can't see how to do all these things, so I'm just going to keep talking rather than wasting more time. From Luke chapter 7, I'm reading, when Jesus had finished saying all the things he was saying as they were coming back down, saying it in the hearing of the people, he entered Capernaum. There, a centurion's servant, whom his master valued highly, was sick and about to die. So it's a centurion, he's a Roman centurion, and the Romans were just absolutely one of the most brutal regimes ever in history. And so it's a centurion, it's a Roman centurion, he's got a servant. The centurion valued this servant. The servant was sick and about to die. So it says the centurion heard of Jesus and sent some elders of the Jews to ask him to come and heal his servant. And when they know, it's interesting. Why did he go to the Jewish leaders and ask them? He just thought that because the Jewish leaders would have a relationship with Jesus, that the Jewish leaders would be able to ask Jesus, and Jesus would do what they want. He didn't understand the rift. He didn't understand the conflict. And the other reason why this centurion did this, the centurion had invested heavily in the building of the synagogue. And so when you have an investor like that, and there's that type of relationship, this investor's thinking, okay, I'm going to go to these Jewish leaders because I've invested in their synagogue, and they certainly will have sway with Jesus. So verse 3, Luke chapter 7, the centurion heard of Jesus, sent some elders of the Jews to him, asking him to come and heal his servant. When they came to Jesus, they pleaded earnestly with him, "This man deserves to have you do this, because he loves our nation and has built our synagogue." So Jesus went with them. He was not far from the house when the centurion sent friends to say to him, "Lord, don't trouble yourself, for I do not deserve to have you come under my roof. That is why I did not even consider myself worthy to come to you." He's saying, "Look, I didn't just send them because they're my servants and you go take care of this. I'm too busy. I can't be bothered to go see Jesus." He is wanting to communicate that he felt unworthy to have Jesus come and sit under or be under his roof. Then it says in verse 7, "That's why I didn't consider myself worthy to come, but say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority with soldiers under me. I tell this one go, and he goes, and that one come, and he comes. I say to my servant, do this, and he does it." When Jesus heard this, he was amazed at him. And turning to the crowd following him, he said, "I tell you, I have not found such great faith even in Israel." Then the man who had been sent returned to the house and found the servant well. Now, here is here's something very interesting about this. I mean, this man is living among the Jewish people, uh, and the Jewish people should have been placing faith in Jesus. Others of the maybe even the Gentile people who had been experiencing Jesus should have also been responding to Jesus, but they weren't. And here is this centurion, and Jesus makes this rather stark comment about him: "I've not found such great faith even in Israel." We could take that one statement alone and ask ourselves, how is our faith today? How are we doing? How are we doing in our faith? Do we have great faith? Are we trusting God for great things? I'm pressed on that particular point this morning. I've been working diligently on a particular project, and it's one that I'm holding my breath. Will this actually come to fruition? The thing that we've been working on, and um, so this morning I'm challenged with: Am I trusting the Lord to see this through? In fact, I've been told that this particular subject should be closed by the end of this week. The end of this week is tomorrow, and I still don't know that we're going to sit down with a lawyer and close out what it is that we've been working on. And I don't know, and it's a big deal to me. And so it's something that I sit here and I'm challenged with: Will I trust in God for this particular situation? So there's a lesson just here in Luke chapter 7, verse 9. I tell you the truth, I have not found such great faith even in Israel. How is your faith this morning? How is my faith this morning? That is a question coming from the life of the centurion. But out of this, there are several principles that we want to pull out about leadership. You know, we can compare Luke and Matthew chapter 5 through 7. Matthew captures more of what is said than does Luke. Luke is more concerned about trying to put things in the proper sequence. And yet, along the way, even though Matthew isn't quite as sequential as Luke in keeping things in their sequence, Matthew often was capturing, especially on the teaching front, more of the larger segments and recording more of what Jesus was saying, as in Matthew chapter 5 through 7. Um, and he captured what he'd been teaching for that first 2 years. Some people will read and say, see, they don't even get their story straight. No, they're writing from different perspective. Uh, Matthew is writing from the perspective wanting to get the content captured, and Luke is writing from the perspective later on of trying to put things more sequentially in the order in which they are written. Now, my friend Mark asked this question: Have you ever been caught off guard? To wonder if Jesus was caught off guard maybe by the Father's sense of humor, because he's telling the disciples as they're walking back into Capernaum, this is how the Father wants you to love your enemies. And the very first person that they encounter is one that might be labeled as an enemy. It's maybe a little bit ironic, maybe a little bit funny that it's a Roman centurion, the enemy, the leader of one of the most brutal armies, a leader in one of the most brutal armies in history. And yet, God uses this one to teach four leadership principles that we can draw out of this passage. Um, he's a Roman soldier sent to maintain order. He's sent to enforce the laws. He's sent to make sure that the proper taxes are collected, proper in this sense, that they're going to at least get what is owed to them. And they're not worried about whether guys like Matthew or other tax collectors were embezzling, or not embezzling, but charging more and having other fees so they could line their pockets as well. They didn't care about that. They just, the Roman soldiers just wanted to make sure that Rome got what was coming to them. So here's this guy asking Jesus for help. There's a principle. It says that this centurion loved the people of Israel. He had built a synagogue for them. We read that in verse 5. And here's a principle: a leader loves those they are leading. He hurts for them and cares for them. Now, this Roman centurion is in effect a leader. And yet in the passage, we read about how he loved the Jewish people, how he invested in their synagogue, how he tried to help them build the synagogue. It is evident the love that he has for his servant here, in that he cares so much, he doesn't want to see him die. So a leader loves those they are leading. That is a key. There's transactional leadership. If you do this for me, then I will do that for you. Then there's transformational leadership, and a transformational leader is always looking out for the good of those they are leading. Next, another lesson that we pull out of this is the humility. So this Gentile demonstrates humility. He sends the Jewish elders and some friends to implore Jesus to help. But notice what he says to the Lord in the message he gives: Don't trouble yourself, for I do not deserve to have you come under my roof. Principle number two, a leader leads with humility, realizing that they are not worthy of the great honor of serving as a leader in the army of the Lord of hosts. There's a greater army than the army of Rome. There's a greater army than the army or the military, let's say the military of the United States. The greatest military in the world is still the military of the Lord of hosts. He's had an air force. The Lord has had an air force since before men could fly because he's had angels. So there we go. The greatest uh, of militaries the world has ever known isn't the Roman, isn't the Chinese, isn't the American. It is the military of the Lord of hosts, and he was able to do things in water as well. So you stack up Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines, Coast Guard. The army of the Lord is still the greatest. And the principle we pull out of this is that a leader leads with humility. He says, I am not worthy to have you come. Great leaders, friends, according to Jesus' standard, demonstrate humility. Now, that again, that's one of the things we can stack up against we can stack up against what we look at in modern leadership. Now, obviously, I've studied a lot of leadership theory in my studies, and there's a lot written. And yet, the most impactful leadership styles are styles that lead with humility. Now, let's place our current leaders, and I'm thinking governmental leaders, country leaders, up against the standard of Jesus. Friends, let's not model ourselves. Let's not follow the model of in fact, I just pulled a book off my shelf, um, several books off my shelf for a reason, but one of the books was Rudy Giuliani. Well, he has really disgraced himself. You know, when I picked up his book, I picked up the book right after 9/11, maybe a couple of years after 9/11. He'd been the mayor of New York City when that all happened, and so there was some great leadership principles that were part of his book. But yet he's disgraced himself. What if our acting president, I say acting, and by that I mean Donald J. Trump, uh, he isn't yet the president. I watched a video the other day of someone said, "What has he done since he's become president?" Well, actually, he's not the president yet till January 20th, and yet he is acting quite presidential and doing a lot of things. But I would tell you, if there is a lack of humility, don't follow that model. Follow the model that Jesus will paint throughout. And this particular Jewish leader paints not Jewish, Roman leader paints a picture of humility. And this is another principle that we bring out. Principle number one was that a leader loves those who are leading. Principle number two, a leader leads with humility. Third uh, is the faith of this foreigner. He says, say the word and my servant will be healed. And to which Jesus said, I have not found such great faith even in Israel. So, principle number three, a leader leads by faith. And we're thinking of Christian leaders. A Christian leader leads by faith, trusting not in what their physical eyes see, but in the invisible God with whom all things are possible. Do we lead with faith? Do I lead with faith? This is a challenge because uh, we can lead with intellect, we can lead with morality, we can lead with lots of different things. But the question is, do we lead with faith? And so I am pressed. I have a strategic planning meeting this morning at 10 o'clock over in Augusta. We're strategically planning our strategic planning meeting, which will be held in January for the college. And so this morning I sit here and I go, uh, am I prepared to lead with faith? Then, lastly, a fourth principle I want to underscore for us, noting the lines of authority with a soldier. He says, I am a man under authority with soldiers under me. Now, I might have people under me as a leader of the college. I've got my academic dean, I've got my administrative data management specialist, I have my registrar, who has also served as our administrative coordinator. I have an another person under me. I have several uh, under me, faculty and whatnot, but I have a board over me. So I am a man under authority as well. And so I have that sense of obligation, that sense of responsibility for, what will I turn out? And the biggest thing between now and June 30th, I need to turn out is about $125,000 that I raise and or more. And so that is my responsibility. I am accountable to do that for the college. And that's not money that we can give other places. That you know, I want people hearing to understand that that money is already in essence spent. It's not. It sounds like a lot of money on a college level. It's actually not a lot of money, but for us it is, and for me it is. And on top of that, I've got to give account to our board. So this man says, I am a man under authority. And so the principle comes out of this: a leader never forgets that they are also under authority and will give an account. Pastors are under authority. Now, there are different models of pastoral leadership. Some models of pastoral leadership, they are under a board of elders. Our particular polity in our church is that there's a board of elders. The pastor is one of the elders. And as when I served as pastor, sometimes the elders would reel me back in and go, "You're getting ahead of yourself here." And I always appreciated that. I was under that authority. Now, there are other models where the pastor is the end all, and whatever the pastor says goes. And frankly, I find that a little bit of a troubling model because the pastor can say, "Well, I answer to God and to God alone." I can see spiritual abuses coming out of that. So I'm always leery about that particular model. But a good and a godly leader will always remember they're going to give account to God for the people placed under their care. Uh, and we can have authority only as we are under authority. And we need to make sure that we are under the authority that the Lord has given us, and that we operate in the authority that the Lord has given us. That we don't abuse that authority, but that we learn how to live with it in a proper measure. Love, humility, faith, authority are all principles of godly leadership modeled by Jesus and also modeled by this centurion some 2,000 years ago. And so we ask ourselves, what type of a leader would I be? Do I apply these four principles to my life? And again, these four principles: a leader loves those who they are leading. Principle number two is a leader leads with humility. Principle number three, a leader leads by faith. A godly Christian leader leads by faith. And principle number four, a leader never forgets that they're also under authority, and I am under the authority of Christ. So there's so much. In fact, when I had uh, my books behind me, and if I didn't have the green screen separating me and the books, I mean, you would see that my shelves are a little bit empty, and there's a reason for that. The wall couldn't quite handle the load of books, and it was becoming evident to me that I needed to kind of rearrange my books. And I really liked how I had things set up, but this old house, that particular wall didn't have another wall underneath it downstairs. Uh, I'm telling you all the stuff you don't need to know to kind of support the weight of all the books that were there. So I've had to kind of shuffle things around a little bit. But you would notice, if I could show you all the books on leadership, tons of books on leadership. That's what I did my PhD in, is leadership. And um, there are great things written, but then there are Jesus things written. And I would tell you that if we will be leaders in the ways of Jesus, we will lead as he modeled. We will lead as he demonstrated. And his leadership methodology, his leadership practices, his leadership principles are vastly, vastly different than those in this world system. Well, friends, thank you for hanging in there this morning in this kind of scaled back, stripped back rendition of the Daily Discipleship Podcast. Um, Hopefully, we'll get our situation straightened around here today. I spent quite a bit of time yesterday and thought we had the problem solved, but we will be getting things resolved and trying to get back to my VMix studio tomorrow. Uh, and then we'll have just 2 days next week before Christmas. Christmas is next Wednesday. Do you believe that? It is coming so fast. Hard to believe. Lord, help us to learn to live according to the leadership principles of Jesus. Help us to live by love. Help us to live in humility. Help us to live in faith, and help us to live under your authority. That we would lead in a way that shows a different way, the way of Jesus to all those around us. Lord, hear our prayer today in Jesus' name. Amen. Friends, have a great day, and I will see you tomorrow.